Hi, this is Scott Schober here from Metuchen, New Jersey, East Coast, for another episode of Cyber Coast to Coast. I'm here with my brother Craig. Hey, Craig, how you doing?
I'm doing okay, Scott. This is Craig, and as usual for the past few weeks, coming at you from Tamarindo in Costa Rica.
All right.
But everything's
Oh,
everything's good here.
good. How's the weather there?
It's hot, always hot.
Yeah.
Not much else to report.
Yeah. Yeah. Here we've been having surprisingly extremely humid and lots of rain lately. Rain's been on up, but it's a little glimmer of sun today. So I'm happy to say it's kind of a little bit nicer. Um, but we got some exciting stories here. Maybe just to give a quick rundown of what we're going to be discussing the three stories. The first one is tax preparers shared personal data with Meta and Google. It's a big Senate report, and I actually did an interview on this actually last week that came out, and I discussed some of these things, and that's coming from The Hill. Then from Cyber News, typo directs millions of U.S. military emails by Mali by mistake. That should be interesting there. So where these emails all ended up, the country of Mali. And then finally, the White House unveils cybersecurity labeling programs for smart devices. A lot of that tied into IoT and some stuff that's being pushed through by FCC. So I'm curious to even get your thoughts on that, Craig, when we get to that story. But maybe to just start us off, there was an interesting AirTag story of the week. A man uses an Apple AirTag to track down stolen motorcycle in a Chicago alley. And I think you picked this story out, and I think it was a very interesting one there. And he basically affixed this AirTag underneath his motorcycle seat because he heard so many stories about cars and carjackings and things of that with all the thefts there in Chicago. And did you have any thoughts on this one, Craig?
Well, I mean, I picked it because it was a semi-positive story. I mean, the
Mhm.
AirTags did their job and no one died, so
Yeah.
that's always a good thing. However, he's still kind of stuck in this weird limbo that we see with a lot of other people that use AirTags to track stolen items. You're always stuck between, well, do I act on the information I have by myself or do I alert the authorities? And then when you alert the authorities, it seems like a lot of them say, well, stand your ground, don't go in with guns blazing, don't confront the thief, it's too dangerous. We'll do the job. But then on the same token, a lot of these police officers either say that or don't say that and then don't act on the information anyway. So it kind of leaves people with stolen property very frustrated because they know they can retrieve it or at least try to retrieve it and they're told not to. So now you're breaking the law to not stop someone who's broke the law already.
What the thief doesn't know is that the victim had left an Apple AirTag underneath the seat of his motorcycle, and he's been tracking it ever since.
Highly frustrating, especially with it having an AirTag on it. It's kind of like a gift and a curse, if you will. The gift is knowing where it's at, but the curse is not having any assistance from CPD.
According to the Find My app on his iPhone, his motorcycle is believed to be sitting in an alley in a box truck about 7 miles away from Lakeview East in West Humboldt Park.
I actually went over there after the dispatchers told me not to go by myself. I was kind of, emotionally enraged about the entire situation, and I was just hoping that I would see it in plain sight. But unfortunately, I did not.
A Chicago police spokesperson told NBC5 on the phone they're advising victims to not take matters into their own hands, but instead call the police district where their stolen item is located in to see if an officer can help them at the scene.
He wasn't on scene for 2 minutes. I asked him could he just take me through the alley or anything of that nature just to, do a safety check or, assist. They denied. They said if I don't see it in plain sight that they can't help me.
Woods knows how dangerous it is to attempt to do a door knock himself and says he's not confident he's going to get his bike back.
I want to just sit over there to see if somebody opens that box truck or maybe even open the garage. My hope is running out.
But it is nice to see a story that's semi-positive. There's a lot of negative press AirTags have been getting for some time, so there's some positive things. And I know for myself, I'm going to be going in a couple weeks to Vegas again for the Black Hat conference. I'm looking forward to that. Certainly working with Cybercrime Radio, interviewing people there at Black Hat again this year. So it's going to be fun. And I'm going to be putting air tags on all my bags for certain because I don't want to risk losing something because it's just too scary, I guess, with travel. And there's been a lot of delays and problems at the airports you probably have heard about as of late. So why risk it? At least I can know where my bags are at all times. And I think it's an important thing. A lot of people are putting them in their wallets too. I know I've talked to a few people recently getting those little cards that they put the air tags inside their wallets. And I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, it sounds like this guy who got his motorcycle stolen is gonna kind of go on a little stakeout too. I mean, he said he was hanging. He believes that he's kind of triangulated the stolen motorcycle into some cube truck in an alley, I think. And he said,
Yeah.
it's like it's got to be in there, but I can't prove it until I can see it or take a picture of it or something. So he's kind of stuck there. But I mean, I guess it's harmless enough if you just stake it out, sit across the street and wait until a door opens, and then you could maybe take a picture. And if that's enough to get the police there, then hopefully that's how it plays out.
Yeah. I do think there's a fine line where you're very tempted when using technology like these tags to track things down. And if you feel that something's stolen, you could be wrong. But even worse, you could put yourself in a situation you're dealing with a thief. A thief may be reckless and they may take out a knife or a gun and go after you or something like that. If you get too close, you try to take the law in your own hands. So I think caution should always be put out there. And in fact, that was one of the reasons and cautions once we developed our little blue sleuth light, the tag detector system. A lot of people say, hey, they want to hunt down somebody, and I try to always caution them, say, hey, don't be too quick. Even though you can track it down and find something, find tags, it's for lost items, but you want to be careful if somebody's stalking or tracking because they could be violent, and just use common sense. So I always like
Yeah.
to put out there and just really, call the local police. They're there to help you. They may not understand all the nuances of technology, but they're trying and they're getting educated. And certainly, we're offering a lot of tools and training from our end, trying to help them as well. But it's going to take some time. But nice story there. Two other things, just maybe one. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the sad news that Kevin Mitnick, the world's most famous hacker, he did pass away this week. He was 59 years old, and certainly a sad thing if you check the headlines of all the cybersecurity news. At least many people are certainly mourning his loss, and he's certainly done a lot of good to the cyber security community there. And just wanted to at least put that out there.
Yeah, I didn't know him as well as you did. One thing I always liked was his that very unique business card he had with wasn't it like a
Yes.
lock picking kit built
Yep.
into this kind of aluminum, stainless steel, or whatever it was, the material, titanium, I don't know. But it was very clever, very unique, and a great identifier. And I remember getting one of those, um, I think directly from him. And I was
Yep.
with you when you interviewed him back. This was several years ago. So
Hmm.
you interviewed him, a few times, I think, and
Yeah,
you
I think.
spent time with him, right?
Yeah, absolutely. He's a great guy. I think it was at the Cyber Investing Summit you were there with me, and we got those little lock picking kits, and I got a privilege of interviewing him. Had a great time. I've also had the privilege of speaking with him at several different cybersecurity events. He was giving keynote, and I was giving a keynote, so we got to talk a bit. There was an after party. I remember one particular trade show also that we were both at, and I pulled up next to him at the bar, and we had a drink, and we were just chatting for a couple hours, trading hacking stories and from fun from the past, and just comparing kind of our childhood. And he told me a lot about his phone freaking, and I shared a lot of the stuff about hacking games and different online forums and things that myself and you used to do as kids. And it was just a nice interchange, I think. There I could certainly relate to him, and I think he could relate to myself and some of the antics that we've always that hackers love to get involved in. And again, I got the privilege of reading a couple of his books and doing video reviews of the different books that he's put out there, and he really has done a good job of educating people, I think, over the years with his different books and speaking events. So certainly, again, certainly a legend in the world of cybersecurity, and he will be missed. And I always encourage people, if you haven't had a chance to learn a little bit about Kevin Mitnick and some of his antics, pick up a couple of his books, and it's a good read, and it'll give you some nice background and overview, and help you appreciate maybe where he stepped over the line and did some things he probably shouldn't. He spent, I think, up to 3 to 5 years in jail, but then he came out as a white hat hacker and kind of reformed and really to educate people. And then later on, he had Mitnick Consulting, security consulting was his business, but he also worked with KnowBe4, was a partner there, and has done a lot of good in educating and cyber awareness and things like that. So just wanted to mention that. And I probably should thank also our sponsor and do a quick shout out there. Dark Kryptonite. They stop ransomware, malware, and phishing in their tracks, eliminating cybercrime, fraud, and information warfare. Dark Kryptonite utilizes advanced blockchain algorithms and zero trust models. You can learn more on darkkryptonite.com. And kryptonite is spelled with a C there. Check it out. They just updated their website, got some really cool stuff on there. You'll learn a lot. Well, our first story, maybe to jump into, is about tax preparers. They shared personal data with Meta, Google, and there was a Senate report that kind of broke the story on this and shared it. This was actually sometime last week, and I know I did a TV interview on this and kind of did some research on it. It was really a kind of a fascinating story because there were really, I think, three different tax companies that file taxes. It was Tax Slayer, H&R Block, and there was a third one. I can't remember the name now, but all very familiar. In my research, I estimated over the past decade or so, they probably filed over 100 million tax filings for people. And it's pretty scary. And really the gist of this story is that the large companies, Meta and Google, and Meta's the parent company there of Facebook. Facebook's a parent company, I should say, of Meta. And what they're basically doing is sharing collected information. And that's the part that was, I think, so concerning there with the whole story there. And the term they use, a pixel tool, where it collects the information as people are going online and filling out tax forms on different websites through these tax portals. That data is being collected and unfortunately sold. And it's sold to third parties. It was sold to advertisers, a mishmash of things. And it was kept kind of done quietly. And it did divulge more information, more than your traditional data breach. Usually we hear about, name and address and, phone number, blah, blah, blah. Some cases, social security number, and that ups the ante. But in this case, it really told if somebody was getting a refund and how much refund and what their gross salary is per year. All of these different things that were really telling. So if you wanted to now perform identity theft or other things and start collecting this information, you could get it. And to me, that's really scary. And they crossed the line. There's likely, if this is proven out in the courts, billions of dollars in damage that could be sought after, depending upon how this all unwinds there. And it was just a little bit of a shock to me in some ways. And then the other side of me said, well, I guess I'm not that surprised. Who is not being victimized by this mass surveillance of big data being collected? And again, we just keep seeing it happen. And it kind of reminds me my next read, and in line with some of the research you and I are doing for another book. But we got this great book here, Privacy in the Age of Big Data. And I just wanted to do a quick shout out. This is from Teresa Payton, who's a colleague and a friend in the world of cybersecurity, and I guess co-authored by Ted Claypool, another cybersecurity expert out there. So I'm kind of excited to dive into that book. If you haven't had a chance, maybe pick up a copy on Amazon. Again, it's called Privacy in the Age of Big Data recognizing threats, defending your rights, and protecting your family. Should be certainly an interesting read as we dive into big data, but it kind of reminded me a lot of this personal data that was collected and sold and shared through these different tax agencies. What was your thoughts on it, Craig?
Well, yeah. Before I forget, let me just say I'll include a link in the show notes to
Okay,
Teresa Payton's book and to the Kevin Mitnick stuff you mentioned, the interviews and things like that, so people could check it out for themselves. But as far as this, I don't know, tax gate or whatever they're going to call it, um, yeah, it was H&R Block Tax Slayer and Tax Act, I guess was the third one. Said they collect the lawmakers, the investigation, they collected far more information than was previously reported. Um, so from what I can gather, this data was kind of it was facilitated the collection of it through Meta and Google's I don't know portals or programs, some kind of tools to do this, and ended up in the hands of uh, uh, well, we don't know who actually got it, because the part of the problem with this stories like this is that it doesn't just get collected by these giant tech companies and then sit on their servers. It ends up in the hands of third parties, and third party can be a company in this country. It could be a scam in this country. It could be a company that resides outside this country where the laws are looser or it's harder to prosecute them for fraud. I think that's the biggest concern on this one, because it's one thing for Facebook to collect a ton of data on everyone, and then I'm sure their security is pretty well guarded, vault of information. But no company is immune from being hacked, no matter how big they are. As soon as you take it to the next level, and now third parties are gaining access to some or all of this data, the chances of those being hacked or those selling that data to even unscrupulous characters, it's like a tenfold increase. And so I'm sure this data, while it might not be personal per se, it's financial data, of course, and that's very valuable to hackers out there. So I think it's certain to say that a lot of this data is going to end up out there for sale.
Yeah, I think it is. You're right. It's really that the third party access is all the unknowns that kind of pop into play, and you wonder how much do they sell it for? Do they parse it up, chop it up, selling it to advertising company? We really don't know, and I think that's part of the problem. And the worst is Meta and Google, who are making money on this, don't know either. They kind of shrug their shoulders, and there was talk about they may just get X number of dollars in fines, and it's kind of unfair because to them as a big tech company, they can afford these fines to make it go away and stay out of court. And what that actually does is they're trying to comply with a lot of the more strict regulations, in particular with some of the data privacy acts that are enacted through Europe. And that's really what flagged this, I believe, because what happens with many of these companies and tax filings, even the data goes back and forth, and it basically cannot go from a European server to a US server here in computers, because it'll set off the flag. And I guess that's what was starting to happen. And they're saying, wait a minute, this doesn't comply with the data protection laws that are in place and agreed upon by these big tech companies. What's going on here? And then the Senate got involved, an investigation ensued, and then the story kind of really broke. And we realized this didn't just happen. This has been going on for years. Yeah. So it tells me that people's personal information, sensitive tax data, is really been out there, and you wonder then, why are so many people potentially getting hacked and compromised in so many different ways? Because there's this added layer of tax related rich data that nobody realized that likely is out there. And again, this is alleged and they're still investigating, but it's pretty clear when you read the writing on the wall what has been done and wrongfully done. And shame on the big tech companies. You kind of have to hold them accountable, number one, and then maybe layer two is the tax preparing companies that are doing this, because they're obviously part of this grand scheme and they're making money all on the taxpayers' back. And that's the part that troubled me the most, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Interesting story, though, certainly. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more. This will develop a lot more, and it'll be a very interesting read in the not too distant future. Maybe it'll be one of the chapters in our future books talking about some data privacy and things like that, because it's certainly a good use case to learn from, I think, what not to do and what to prevent. Before we jump in the next story, just a thank you again to our sponsor. Dark Kryptonite stops ransomware, malware, and phishing in their tracks, eliminating cybercrime, fraud, and information warfare. Dark Kryptonite utilizes advanced blockchain algorithms and zero trust models. You can learn more on their website, darkkryptonite.com, and kryptonite with a C. Well, this next story here comes from Cyber News, and there's a typo that directs millions of U.S. military emails to Mali by mistake. And this is kind of interesting story, I think, when you start to dig into it and learn a little bit more about it. And I'm just pulling it up right here because I lost the screen for a second.
It's not a hardcore cybersecurity story per se. It's it's more like something to kind of, well, a big, I guess, international embarrassment, which could have true real security implications, but it's very unclear right now. I think it's more just a big kind of black eye for the US for doing something stupid.
Yeah, and I guess it really comes down to they kind of talk about mistakes between typing a U.S. military domain as .mil, which is ever oh so close to .ml, which is used by Mali, which they mention here is a West African country. Certain things like that, it shouldn't exist, right? Wouldn't you think that? I mean, when you're setting up the whole internet and things and security, there should be provisions in there where you don't want to have these things so close where you could easily do a simple typo. And that's really the premise of a lot of how spoofing works. You could spoof somebody's thing, and oftentimes they'll change one letter, or even fool people on a website. They'll kind of spoof a website domain, and all it takes is it's the I instead of the L or the one instead of the L. The average person looking quick will never notice it. And I guess that's kind of the part right here. And it mentions that the Pentagon is taking steps to address the mistake. However, the male government, the military, junta took power after 2020 to control of the domain. So I guess it's still they're kind of going through these little typo and problems here, and it's more of maybe a funny story. But when you look at the leaks, continual leaks, I mean that's the part that scares me more and more. They've got what I call an ongoing black eye. Remember, and they even touch on it. Where'd it go? Here it is. And the Pentagon was shaken up by the 21-year-old Jack Texaria or whatever, who was in the Air National Guard, accused of sharing classified military documents about Russia's war in Ukraine and all the sensitive national secrets and things on Discord, different topics and things, and social media platforms. So that was a huge black eye that I don't even think they've ever recovered from. And now you've got these other type of things. It just starts to make you wonder, maybe a general question. Do you think the United States is doing enough to keep things safe and keep things secure?
I mean, it's too big of an organization for things unfortunately, for things like this to not happen. Like things it's gonna slip through the cracks. I mean, just a personal anecdote. I do one of my job duties at Berkeley is data entry, and a lot of times it's coming off of an old-fashioned quote form, which is printed or something. Mm-hmm. So I have to manually type these emails in, and we do a lot of government, a lot of work with government customers. So we get, the emails are absurd. It's like .mail, .mil, .stiv, @.mail, .mil. They just goes on. And if you can't copy and paste that stuff, and even if you can, you're not going to double check it. So if there's one letter that's mistyped, someone made a simple mistake at one point, it's going to get repeated down the chain over and over again, and you're going to miss this. And so, in our case, it's we get an email bounce and it doesn't work or something. Maybe we miss an order. Not the end of the world, but when you have people's lives on the line and you have a country, this country is friendly with Russia, so I don't think they're going to team up against the U.S. tomorrow with Russia. But it just looks bad. It's international politics it's a lot about how things look. And when it looks bad, that is bad.
Yeah, that's true. The optics on it don't bode well for sure. Yeah. Very, very interesting though. All right, good. And let's dive into our third story here. And just a thank you to our sponsor. Dark Kryptonite stops ransomware, malware, and phishing in their tracks, eliminating cybercrime, fraud, and information warfare. Dark Kryptonite utilizes advanced blockchain algorithms and zero trust models. You can learn more if you visit their website, darkkryptonite.com. This next story comes from Security Week. White House unveils cybersecurity labeling program for smart devices. And I've been hearing a lot about this. I actually was listening to some podcasts earlier over lunch, and a colleague, Dr. Chase Cunningham, was talking, and he was actually digging into some of this, and he kind of gave praise to it that the White House is doing something this administration is trying. And I kind of feel the same. I think it's important that regardless of your political stand, it doesn't really matter. But they're trying to do something. They're not just sitting back and letting things be compromised. They're trying to make a difference and set up a program where things could be more cyber secure. And that's really the essence of this. It's labeling smart devices. And when we think about a smart device, it's, something could be an appliance in your house, could be a refrigerator, or toaster, your doorbell, whatever, things that are interconnected. The IoT, the Internet of Things world, is what really is at the crux of this, I think, where many of them are low cost, high volume devices, mass produced, usually overseas, and they don't bake security in, and there's no easy way to update them. So they're kind of pushing this forward, I think, to label smart devices that are maybe safer, they're not as vulnerable to attacks, and this U.S. Cyber Trust Mark Shield logo will be put on products. Kind of reminds me of an FCC certification or things like that, where hey, this particular device is safe and it's not going to emit any spurious radiation that could cause harm to you or your family, or this particular transformer has been tested and meets certain safety standards. When you do see those things, it gives you some peace of mind, and you kind of then focus in on, where was this thing manufactured? Can I trust it? Those questions naturally come out, I think, when you see something is certified. And that's really what I guess they're trying to do there, is improve consumer products, in particular electronics, HVAC systems, climate control systems, you name it. And I was going to get your thought on this. Do you think it's better or worse that this cybersecurity labeling program, a lot of it is support, but it's voluntary support by the big guys? What's your thoughts on that, Craig?
I think I'm for it. I think it should work out. If you look at past attempts at similar things, you mentioned like FCC certifications and safety standards. I think of it also as like Energy Star. That was started, decades ago by, it's kind of a government policy, and it started out to, the big kind of push to save energy. And I looked it up real quick, and it says, an Energy Star household, I think, has an average savings of $450 per year. That's something, commendable. It's easy to do, but I think it goes further, and that it even though it's a voluntary thing for these big tech companies, I think it ends up becoming a badge of honor, and it becomes a marketing thing too. They can say we comply to these standards for these smart devices, and then soon that's going to become, I'm sure it's going to have to be a little label on the product whether it's on a retail shelf or on a web page or however you're buying it. And so consumers will see that easily, and soon they're going to kind of flock to that because they know it's safe, or at least they believe it's safe. Of course, this doesn't make it immune. These things could still be hacked or whatever. There's going to be hacks. There's going to be this cat and mouse game will go on and on. But
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say that if it's a standard and it's ratified by professionals, and it just takes a few big companies to kind of adopt it, then others will follow suit. And soon it might never become mandatory, but it won't matter because at some point the market forces will outweigh that, and people will choose it by default and say, well, if it doesn't have this label, I don't trust it at all.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I think it's a good thing for the industry. And I've been looking at smart home stuff, IoT devices for years, but they could never rest on a standard. There still is no
Yeah.
really one single standard. There a bunch of companies joined the Matter standard, including Apple, which was kind of the holdout. They always, Apple usually goes their own route. They're more independent. They want to control the whole stack. But they joined Matter, and so that gives me some hope. Maybe there will be a good kind of plethora of smart, safe home devices in the very near future. And, Apple will make their version and I'll probably get it someday. But I've been into smart home stuff for 20 years. And I remember buying it way back before any of these standards were established.
Mm.
And it worked. It was a little, a little flaky, a little kludgy. You kind of had to configure stuff yourself and do your own research. But ever since I unplugged all those devices, I never wanted to go back until they had a single standard that I can trust. So
Yeah.
I think this will work out in the end. It might take a while, but I think it's going to work out for both the government and these companies that are involved with it.
Yeah, I think I kind of concur because I think it also brings up the topic. It makes you think about cybersecurity. It makes you question, is this device truly secure? Kind of prove it to me a little bit. And that's what you're implying, I guess. And maybe it's going to be similar to CE mark, certainly CE mark, certainly if you're going to ship products to, Europe or Canada or whatever, you want to have CE mark. And that's really a self-certification that you basically test and make sure that your product complies to the different rules and regulations set forth under the CE, and you declare it, but it's a self-certification. I wonder if this sounds like a little bit more about it's voluntary right now for some of the big companies, but will they appoint a body that actually has to maintain it and grant it certification? And hey, now you can put a sticker on the product or something. I guess we'll find out a little bit more as this unfolds. But overall, I think I give them thumbs up and say it's a positive thing that will only lead to more and more secure products. And I think it also may help going forward because when you're designing products, like for example, we design our products, even our low cost devices, we're putting a bootloader in there. So if there is a bug, an error, or something vulnerable that for some reason we missed it, well, these products are sprinkled around the world. We have the ability to give customers updates and they could do a firmware upload into it without having to have a dongle and a computer and all these other devices and things, hardware to actually do it. They won't have to send it back to the factory, but in the field, they can update it for a more secure experience. I wonder if this will give a push for that. Maybe this will make these large consumer-based companies that are developing smart devices for the home and car and everywhere else think about, okay, let's make sure that this product is upgradable. Yeah, it'll add a little bit of cost to it, but it'll make it 10 times safer because if and when they discover they got to update something, they can seamlessly do it.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Well, certainly a nice topics here again. We appreciated the stories there about tax preparers, how they share personal data with Meta and Google, and that Senate's investigating that still, and everything's kind of unfolding there. How that crazy typo, how it could affect literally millions of U.S. military emails. that was a little boo-boo made by mistake there. And then finally, this new program that they're kind of implementing and pushing through the current administration, the White House unveils cybersecurity labeling program for smart devices. So, yeah, some interesting stories, and we really appreciate everybody's support for our podcast, and certainly your comments. I do get a lot of comments on social media, and sometimes when I'm presenting too, I talk to people about how they enjoy it. So certainly appreciate that. And again, this podcast is available on YouTube, Spotify, Google, iHeart, Apple, Amazon, and more. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and review our podcast. And certainly appreciate that if you do take some time and give it a review. For questions and comments, you can contact us on Linktree /Scott Schober for all our social media links. And if we read your comment or question on the podcast, we'll send you a choice of a signed copy of Hacked Again, Cybersecurity is Everybody's Business, or Senior Cyber. We'd love to hear from you and love to get a book in your hands and get your feedback. So thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another new episode packed with cyber news and tips to stay safe. And just thank you again to our sponsor as we're heading out. Dark Kryptonite stops ransomware, malware, and phishing in their tracks, eliminating cybercrime, fraud, and information warfare. Dark Kryptonite utilizes advanced blockchain algorithms and zero trust models. You can learn more if you visit their website, darkkryptonite.com. So again, this is Scott Schober signing out from the West Coast. Stay safe, everybody, until we talk to you again on our next podcast.
Stay safe. Bye now.
With your hosts, Scott and Craig Schober.